Well, good morning, everybody, and a big morning on this Friday here in America's Newsroom. 1 hour from now, President Trump delivers his speech at CPAC. That's the Conservative Political Action Conference. Those remarks, there's a live look now, National Harbor, Maryland. Those remarks coming amid the growing national debate over gun rights in the wake of the Florida school shooting 9 days ago. And there will be major news, we are told, in this speech regarding North Korea. So stay tuned. We've got you covered. And good morning. Welcome to Friday. I'm Bill Hemmer, live inside of America's Newsroom. Hello.
Thank goodness it's Friday. Good morning, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. In just a few moments, the president will be leaving the White House for his big speech. Yesterday, Mr. Trump met with education and law enforcement officials and pushed for tougher security at our schools, among other measures, to keep students safe.
We're going to do strong background checks. We're going to work on getting the age up to 21 instead of 18. We're getting rid of the bump stocks. And we're going to be focusing very strongly on mental health. We have to harden our schools, not soften them up. A gun-free zone to a killer or somebody that wants to be a killer, that's like going in for the ice cream. That's like, here I am, take me. We have to get smart on gun-free zones.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live for us on the North Lawn this morning. Good morning, John.
Sandra, good morning to you. We've got breaking news from the White House this morning that an hour from now, when the president speaks to CPAC at the Gaylord Hotel down there in Oxon Hill, just south of Washington, D.C., he will announce a new package of sanctions on North Korea. This is being described to Fox News by White House officials as, quote, a massive package of sanctions, the biggest yet. And then that will be followed, the president's speech, by the Treasury Secretary will be in the briefing room and add a greater level of detail and granularity to this new package of sanctions that will be against the Pyongyang regime. The president will be talking tough about North Korea this morning. Yesterday, it was his deputy, the vice president, who was talking tough at CPAC, explaining why at the opening ceremonies 2 weeks ago at the Olympics he did not applaud the North Korean delegation. Listen here.
For all those in the media who think I should have stood and cheered with the North Koreans, I say the United States of America doesn't stand with murderous dictatorships. We stand up to murderous dictatorships.
And, of course, we'll be carrying the president's speech live this morning so you can see the news that he makes on North Korea. The president's speech this morning is also going to focus on the Douglas High School shooting, gun safety, and what can be done to avoid such things in the future. The president voicing support for improved background checks. You heard just a moment ago raising the minimum age to buy a rifle to 21 from 18. That would match rifle sales with the age needed to buy a handgun. And also arming trained individuals at schools to act as a first line of defense if a shooter gets in. The president insisting schools are soft targets that need to be hardened. Listen here.
You have teachers that are Marines for 20 years and they retire, they become a teacher, and they're Army, Navy, Air Force, they're Coast Guard, they're people that have won shooting contests, and you know they're for whatever. This is what they do. They know guns. They understand guns. I think we need hardened sights. We need to let people know. You come into our schools, you're going to be dead, and it's going to be fast. And unless you do that, you're going to always have this problem.
And clearly, the president's got very strong opinions on that particular aspect of what he believes is something that could make schools safe. He gets a lot of opposition to it, though, even though some schools in America already are doing this, but on a very limited basis. I'm also told this morning that the president not likely to mention this news that we got, Sandra, about this Broward sheriff's deputy who stayed outside the school even though he was armed and had been a school resource officer at Marjory Stoneman Douglas since 2009 while the carnage was going on inside the school. Sandra?
And as we know, he has now resigned. John, clearly this is going to be a wide-ranging speech by the president set to begin about 1 hour from now. What else do we know the president's going to be talking about?
He's going to spend a lot of time talking about immigration, in particular the threat from the notorious MS-13 gang. This is something that the president was talking about yesterday as well, lamenting the fact that California has got these sanctuary cities. At the same time, there is a huge gang problem coming across the border. So the president yesterday issuing a threat to pull ICE agents out of California. Listen here.
We ever pulled our ICE out, and we ever said, hey, let California alone, let them figure it out for themselves. In 2 months, they'd be begging for us to come back. They would be begging. And you know what? I'm thinking about doing it.
Truth be told, there is no plans for the president to pull ICE agents out of California, but the president clearly has a burr under his saddle when it comes to California and these sanctuary cities. The president also taking aim this morning at Democrats over DACA, tweeting, quote, "For those of you who are still interested, the Democrats have totally forgotten about DACA. Not a lot of interest on this subject from them." I'm told he's also going to go after Nancy Pelosi for her comments yesterday that one way to improve border security would be to take a lawnmower and cut the grass. Sandra?
We look forward to that speech from the president in just about 1 hour. John Roberts, thank you.
For more on all that, I want to bring in Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union, which organizes CPAC. What a week it's been, Matt. Good morning to you. You will introduce the president. What do you expect to hear today?
I expect to hear from the president a bit of an intimate conversation with these conservative activists because he's built a strong relationship with them. And I think he's going to get honest, Bill. He's going to get honest about how serious our problems are and his proposed solutions to solve them.
Such as what?
Look, I think the vice president talked about the problems overseas. He was specific about North Korea. I wouldn't be surprised if the president explains our threats overseas. I think it is true that the president wants to make sure that people understand when it comes to the question of immigration. He is serious. He is serious about wanting to get a deal on immigration. He is taking the most sensitive problems we have in society. He's putting it out there. Sometimes he makes people a little concerned about where it will end up. It's the job of the president to engage the country in the problems of the day.
Yeah, what do you expect to hear on the gun issue? We heard a lot yesterday. Today, more of the same? What's your expectation?
I think more of the same, and I think what he did with those families is the right next step. The president is consoling us and consoling those families, but he's also opening up the door to have a conversation about what should be done on guns. I think what the vice president said, that no American teacher or student should fear for their lives in our schools, that this is a line in the sand we must draw. We must protect our kids. We have a lurch towards violence in our society, and the president's going to hit that head on.
Wayne LaPierre, head of the NRA, we watched his speech yesterday. At one point, he paused and took notice of how quiet the room was. What was going on inside that room when he was speaking, Matt?
I think it was more somber. These people at CPAC and conservatives, they strongly support the Second Amendment. They view Wayne LaPierre as a friend and a leader. But this is a somber time, and his speech reflected that, and I think the audience participation reflected that. Look, I think conservatives are open to the idea of keeping our kids safe. And what those policies are, we're going to have a big debate about. It's what a democracy should do. And I think there are times when we should listen more and talk a little less.
55 minutes away, we'll have live coverage right here. Matt Schlapp, appreciate your time this morning. As
Thanks, Bill.
The headliner, you could say, comes up at 10 o'clock Eastern time. Thank you, Matt. We'll talk to you real soon. 8 minutes past the hour now.
Thank you.
News now.
Shocking new details from last week's high school massacre in Florida. The sheriff's office revealing last night that the school's armed officer, the only one on duty outside, and did nothing while shots rang out inside the building. That officer, Scott Peterson, who's seen here back in 2015, reportedly stood there for 4 minutes without going in. The shooting spree lasted 6 minutes. The Broward County Sheriff is completely in disbelief.
A deputy arrive at the west side of Building 12, take up a position, and he never went in.
Was he there when the shooter was still inside the building?
Yes, he was.
And so what should he have done?
Went in, addressed the killer, killed the killer.
Phil Keating is live in Parkland, Florida. Phil, there is word that teachers and staff at Stoneman Douglas are returning to the school there this morning.
Good morning, Sandra. Yes, a difficult, emotional, and clearly very trying and heavy day underway behind me at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, where for the first time since 9 days ago, they were in their classrooms as the gunfire erupted. and 17 people lost their lives, and they fled. Today, they can voluntarily return here to the school, go inside of their classrooms, collect any personal items they may have abandoned in their rush to evacuate the building, things like briefcases, purses, cell phones, anything else of a personal nature. They're not required to be here today, but they certainly are allowed, and there are many people choosing to do that. They will actually be returning here for work for planning days next week, Monday and Tuesday. As for that school resource officer, Scott Peterson, on the force for 30-plus years, he resigned/retired yesterday afternoon after Broward County Sheriff suspended him pending an investigation into his behavior as the shooting was unfolding. That man also seen in a board meeting video from 2015. Just 4 years ago, he was awarded School Resource Officer of the Year. But now we all know that on the day of the shooting, as Nicholas Cruz is inside shooting and killing people, Peterson was outside of the door of Building 12, the freshman building, and not going inside, as is the new national protocol established over the past 19 years after the Columbine High School massacre, when all of the responding cops and deputies covered the perimeter outside the school waiting for SWAT to arrive. That was all replaced. Now it is, you hear shots fired, every responding officer immediately storms into the building looking for the shooter. As for the suspect, Nicholas Cruz, well, more than 20 times the sheriff's department was called for his erratic and volatile behavior over the past few years. And the sheriff also announced yesterday 2 of its deputies are now suspended pending investigation for some of their encounters with the suspect and what little follow-up they did or did not do after that. Sandra.
Phil Keating in Florida for us this morning. Thank you.
Absolute systemic failure. And when you think about, Sandra, over the last just 48 hours, what we've learned about what went wrong, and that's just what we're being told. There is so much more to the story that we need to uncover.
You can only imagine the sheriff's thoughts when he reviewed that surveillance video. Complete disbelief.
And the families, too, and the students, and on it goes. President Trump now threatening to pull ICE officers and Border Patrol agents out of the state of California. The renewed battle over sanctuary states, a big topic at CPAC today. That's coming up straight ahead here.
Plus, new charges against former Trump campaign officials Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. And now a Manafort spokesperson suggesting that Mueller is exceeding his authority. Reaction from former Trump campaign chairman Corey Lewandowski in a moment.
Also, Sandra, as we await the president's speech, a warning from the vice president about the midterms in November. Ronna McDaniel, head of the RNC, will respond to that coming up live next.
Any leader who says that $1,000 in the pockets of working families is crumbs is out of touch with the American people. It would be a disaster for our cause if Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House again. But we're not going to let it happen. They're doing everything they can to try and win back the Congress next November. I mean, we don't have to wonder what would happen if the party of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer won the House and the Senate this November, do we? I mean, remember the last time it happened? I do. I was actually there the last time Democrats ran the Congress. And they nearly ran America into the ground.
The vice president yesterday speaking at CPAC, blasting Democrats along the way, reminding Republicans do not be complacent before these midterm elections. Ronna McDaniel has that job, head of the RNC, chairwoman. And Ronna, welcome back here and good morning to you. I don't need to tell you Democrats are motivated. What's the response to that?
Well, they are motivated. They thought they were going to walk away with the White House in 2016, and it was a huge wake-up call, and we have seen them energized in these special elections, and we have to match that urgency, and we're seeing that already. We've had more voter contacts. The RNC has had 500,000 new small dollar donors since President Trump took office. We've surpassed every fundraising record. We've got to keep that going, and I think Vice President Pence is right. We need that urgency going into these midterms because we have something to fight for. We need to protect America's comeback.
Got it. So the message is one thing, the money is one thing as well. And if the economy stays good, you stand a pretty good chance, frankly, of maintaining the majority. However, you've got these state house races in districts where Donald Trump won overwhelmingly, and now they're flipping. Why is that?
Well, I think when you win 900 legislative seats under the term of Barack Obama, you are going to lose some here and there, and they're being given outweighed credibility and attention. I mean, we won 3 out of 4 in Florida. Some of them are anomalies, like what happened in Kentucky. But we did win 5 out of 5 congressional races this year, and that's what's really going to matter with the tipping point of majority in the House and the Senate.
So you're not worried?
No, I'm worried. Every day I think about how am I going to keep these majorities. I don't want to turn it over to Pelosi or Schumer, but we're doing the right things. We've taken the right steps to keep those majorities. We're in 22 states, but Vice President Pence is right. Our base has to be energized. We have to turn out and vote because we have something to protect, which is this comeback that Americans are feeling across this country with higher wages, more bonuses, higher 401ks. This is something to fight for, and we know the Democrats will just take us backwards.
You've been at CPAC this week. Do they get the sense of urgency, those in attendance like you?
I'm heading there today, but I've been watching, and yeah, they get the urgency. We've seen it at the RNC all year with the record small dollar donations we've seen, with volunteers signing up, but we're going to have to keep that going, and President Trump has turned our country around with policies that have made America greater, and we cannot risk going back to the dark ages of Pelosi and Schumer.
The dark ages. Now, RNC fundraising is up on the screen. We can show our viewers in January raised about $12 million, about $40 million cash on hand. Democrats, you know, are raising money as well. Last point. Mike Pence said yesterday Donald Trump threw out the playbook 14 months ago, and you will do it again in November. What does that look like?
Well, I think President Trump brings a whole new energy and a whole new coalition to the Republican Party. I saw it in Michigan. He connects with voters. He says to you, I understand that your wages were stagnant under Barack Obama. He's going to be on the road campaigning, fighting for this comeback and fighting for these majorities because he knows how important it is that we keep America going in the right direction.
So
we cannot go back.
So he will be on the road then, is that right?
We want him on the road. We want him all over this country. There is nobody who energizes our base better than President Trump.
All right, we'll see you then. Thank you. Come on back real soon, okay?
Thanks for having me.
Washington. Thank you for taking time with us today.
Well, he was a rising star, a rising political star, but now one governor is free falling, facing felony charges. New details on allegations involving blackmail and a mistress. And massive flooding overtaking the Midwest, why it could get worse very soon.
We always expect the ice jam, but you don't expect it to go like this. This is really, really high. I've had my place for 30 years, and this is the highest I've ever seen it.
All right, well, the president is now taking questions at the White House. He is en route to CPAC 2018 to Oxon Hill, Maryland. Well, he'll be speaking within the hour. We're going to bring that to you live when it begins, but we're told that on his way, leaving the White House, he did start answering questions. And so when we get those and get that video, we'll bring that to you live when we have it. Meanwhile, President Trump put in California on notice, threatening to pull ICE agents out of the state. It continues to refuse to assist federal immigration officials. Trump saying it would teach them a lesson.
Frankly, if I wanted to pull our people from California, you would have a crime nest like you've never seen in California. All I'd have to do is say, ICE and Border Patrol, let California alone. You'd be inundated. You would see crime like nobody's ever seen crime in this country. And yet we get no help from the state of California. They are doing a lousy management job.
Joining me now, Attorney General for the state of Arkansas, Leslie Rutledge joins us. She'll be speaking later on today about sanctuary cities at CPAC. She joins us live from there now. Leslie, thanks for joining us this morning. So what did you make when you heard the president float this idea of pulling ICE agents from the state of California?
Well, it's unfortunate that the leadership in the state of California has pushed the president and federal authorities to this limit. What they have done in California, making it a sanctuary state essentially, is tying the hands of local law enforcement who are now unable to arrest those criminals, and instead our law enforcement agents are being handcuffed. And so I think the president's making a very strong point that if you don't want to protect your city, then why should the federal government put those resources in place? Unfortunately, we need those resources in place in California. We need those resources in place around the country.
You know, Leslie, he suggested that if he was actually to follow through with that threat. The state would, quote, have a crime nest like you've never seen. They'd be begging for us to come back. Would this be a good move for the president? Would you support that kind of move? And how do you think California would respond?
Well, I'm hopeful that California is going to respond to the mere talking and say, you know what, it's time to do something about crime in California. We don't need another Kate Steinle to die at the hands of a repeat criminal, illegal alien in our sanctuary state. That good, hardworking Americans need to feel safe in their neighborhoods, safe in their schools. Unfortunately, we have too many criminals who are illegal aliens living amongst us, and we will no longer protect those criminals. We will instead protect the good citizens of America. So I'm hopeful that the folks in California are going to step up and say, Mr. President, we want to work with federal authorities. We want to rid our streets of crime, and we want to welcome in these ICE agents so that way our families in California can be safe.
You know, Leslie, this battle over sanctuary cities in this country is a fight that you're firmly engaged in and have been for quite some time. The speech you're going to be delivering later today at CPAC is titled A Tale of Two Sanctuary Cities. Can you give us a little preview?
Well, essentially, I'm going to be talking about very different visions for America, whether it's the liberal left's vision of creating unconstitutional chaos through corruption and inviting in and putting deference to illegal immigrants versus U.S. citizens versus America. America is the original sanctuary city, and it always will be. But we are a country of laws, and we must uphold and defend those laws. The reasons why we have all of the freedoms that we do is because we are a country of laws. And so it's imperative that states and cities and federal government work together. We must support our law enforcement officers. We must support those federal agencies so that way, again, they can work together to keep Americans safe. It's all about defending the rule of law. Law is sewn into the very fabric of our nation, again, and it's imperative that we protect those freedoms by protecting and defending the rule of law.
You know, Leslie, if I could have you sort of give us the temperature there at CPAC with Wayne LaPierre from the NRA giving a fiery speech. You know, this is only days after this mass shooting happened down in Florida. The president now showing a willingness to change some gun laws in this country. What is the chatter there and the response?
Well, I think the response is one that while our hearts break, and they certainly do for the victims, the families, all those impacted by last week's tragedy, it's important that as leaders we come together and put forth common sense laws in place, and whether that's addressing the mental health concerns, giving the law enforcement the authority, giving the courts the authority not to impede on someone's rights, but rather if someone is a danger to themselves or others and they have a firearm, to temporarily take that firearm away until we are able to see whether or not they are going to commit a criminal act and harm others.
It sounds like the conversation is leaning towards what we're hearing from the president, that there are some gun laws that could be and should be changed.
Well, it's a matter of addressing those, again, with mental illness who have displayed, whether it's in person through conversations on social media. So much of what is being said these days is on social media. And having law enforcement address that, giving parents and students, empowering them to step up and say, my child has been threatened, or someone in his or her class has said that they are going to harm other students at their school, and taking those matters to law enforcement so that way they can properly investigate, and the courts can determine whether or not that individual, again, is a threat to him or herself or others. And if they have access to firearms, perhaps they need to not have access to firearms, and let's make sure they have access to the mental health treatment that they need.
As the Attorney General of your state, immigration is on the forefront of issues that you're dealing with. What is the message that you're bringing to CPAC on that front today?
With regard to immigration, I want Arkansans and Americans to know that as conservatives, we are for immigration. But we want individuals to come to this country legally and in adherence with the laws of the country. And we want them to come and love, respect the United States of America just as we do. However, we cannot tolerate these cities and states who defy the rule of law, who tell their local law enforcement, no, you cannot work with ICE agents, no, you cannot work with federal authorities. And certainly when we have individuals who are charged with upholding the law, such as my Democratic colleague in California, who has outright said that he will hold good, patriotic businesses accountable for working with these federal authorities, he should be focused instead on prosecuting criminals rather than prosecuting good American businesses that create jobs.
Leslie, how would you describe the state of the conservative movement and the Republican Party as you stand there behind that audience as it awaits the president just moments from now? He's departing the White House en route there, his second year in a row addressing this crowd. What does it feel like? How would you describe the current state of things?
Well, the crowd is certainly energized this morning. They're currently listening to, I believe, Laura Ingraham speaking right now behind me. They have heard from Secretary Zinke, Secretary Perry. This crowd is energized, and this is a movement that has been energized for a number of years and will continue to be. That now, because of tax reform, because of so many rolling back regulations, that Americans, conservative Americans, and all Americans are seeing their paychecks bigger. They're seeing more jobs. They're seeing businesses staying in their hometowns, their families having the opportunity to stay right where they are and to continue working. That sort of positive momentum that this president has done in his first year in office has energized this crowd, but it's energized people across the state.
Leslie Rutledge, AG of Arkansas, thanks for joining us this morning. We'll hear from you later today.
Thank you.
So we mentioned this a moment ago. Fox News Alert now want to take you to the White House. This was recorded a moment ago. President Trump on his way to CPAC across town and stopped to talk with reporters. It runs about 4 minutes. Drop on in.
Well, it's a very big subject. It's a subject that everybody's talking about, obviously, for all the wrong reasons. And we're going to do something about it. We're going to make changes. I see Congress wanting to act now for the first time. So we certainly have to strengthen background checks. Everybody agrees with that. And we're going to make background checks very, very strong. I'll be speaking about that at CPAC. Very, very important is to do that. And also the mentally ill, people that are they have mental problems, we cannot allow them to have guns. So we're going to be very strong on that. That's going to go a long way. I also believe that schools have to have some form of protection. They can't just be open-ended, gun-free. Gun-free is an invitation for these crazy people to just come in and shoot. If they're not gun-free, if there are guns inside, held by the right people, by highly trained professionals, you're going to see this end. It won't be happening anymore. Our schools are essentially gun-free zones, and that makes them very dangerous places.
The Parkland sheriff was armed and he didn't go in. Does that give you any pause?
Say it, what?
The Parkland sheriff was armed and he didn't go in. Does that give you any pause?
Deputy Sheriff Peterson, I guess his name is. I mean, they brought it out. I was surprised. But it deserves to be brought out. What he did, he's trained his whole life. There's an example. But when it came time to get in there and do something, he didn't have the courage or something happened. But he certainly did a poor job. There's no question about that. He was there for 5 minutes. For 5 minutes. That was during the entire shooting. He heard it right at the beginning. So he certainly did a poor job. But that's a case where somebody was outside, they're trained, they didn't react properly under pressure, or they were cowards. It was a real shot to the police department.
Would teacher be any different? Would an armed teacher be
Well, I think we really have a group of people that want to do the right thing. The NRA is composed of people that I know very well. These are good people, in many cases great people. They're patriots. They love our country. The NRA wants to do the right thing. I've been speaking to them, and they do want to do the right thing. Look, I haven't been here that long. This has been going on for a long time, many years, decades, and we're going to get it fixed. But the only way you're going to get it fixed is you have to have a certain degree of offensive power within the school. It can't only be defense. You have to have protection within the schools, and we're going to work it out. But we are going to be very, very powerful, strong on background checks, especially having to do with people with mental problems. This
person that did this horrible act. He was mentally deranged, and everybody knew it for a long period of time. I guess they had 38 red flags, 39 red flags. You can't do any better than that. Unfortunately, they didn't catch it. They should have caught it. This could have been prevented. So the whole mental situation is very big, but background checks to me are very important, and we have to strengthen up our schools. I'm going over to CPAC. I'll be talking about it. Thank you all very much.
That from the White House a moment ago, talking about the background checks, the mentally ill, and also saying that Congress is ready to act. And Sandra, this news coming now as we wait the big address at CPAC coming up at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. In this report out of Miami last night about a series of systemic failures that went on for a period of years in Broward County. You know, the campus cop never went inside. We know that now. The tape delay was on a 20-minute delay. In November of last year, a potential school shooter reported to police. Weeks prior, a similar report went in as well. 2 years ago, a report sent to the school officer, Scott Peterson, who was the same man who was outside who did not go inside. That's in addition to the 2 warnings that went to the FBI. That is what we know of so far. And we're 9 days into this right now and a lot more to uncover.
In the sheriff's words, it makes your stomach sick.
Yes.
As you learn those details. All right. Meanwhile, Special Counsel Robert Mueller is stepping up action in the Russia probe, filing a new indictment against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his one-time deputy, Rick Gates, with fresh charges of tax evasion and bank fraud. A Manafort spokesman responding, quote, "The new allegations against Mr. Manafort once again have nothing to do with Russia and the 2016 election interference collusion. Mr. Manafort is confident that he will be acquitted and violations of his constitutional rights will be remedied." Corey Lewandowski is former Trump campaign manager and chief strategist for America First Action, and he joins us on a morning of a lot of action. Corey, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what did you make when you learned of these new charges against Manafort and Gates?
Well, I think what we've seen here is that what Paul and Rick have been accused of clearly predate their time or any relationship they had with the Trump campaign. So what they've been accused of is sometime during 2006, so about 10 years ago, they were doing business overseas with a number of what we call bad hombres, Russian oligarchs and others, and they didn't disclose that information either on their taxes, which is what Bob Mueller has said, or they've been funneling money allegedly through a number of foreign entities, Cyprus and others. And so they're going to be held accountable for that. But the very important thing here is this had nothing to do with the Trump campaign, with Russia collusion, and everything that those two have been accused of by Robert Mueller and his team predate their tenure at the Trump campaign by at least 10 years. So I think they need to be held accountable for their wrongdoings if they have done something wrong. But to their point, and I think it's a fair one, it has nothing to do with anything as it relates to the campaign, Russia collusion, cooperation, or coordination.
So is the special counsel, Robert Mueller, is he exceeding his authority, do you believe?
You know, I don't know, because I think as you look at what Paul and Rick have been accused of, clearly that started because of their relationship with the Trump campaign. And what we have seen is that Paul, for whatever reason, had an email that said he was willing to brief some Russians privately, some people that he used to work with privately on how the campaign is going. So that's probably where the Mueller investigation started, and I don't know. So if it began there by Paul offering in an email to brief some Russians that he used to work for on the status of the campaign, then I think it does fall under the purview of the Mueller operation. But, you know, whatever took place 10 years prior, the money laundering, supposedly, and the allegation of tax evasion and not being on some of their tax returns, does that predate the campaign? You bet it does. Did it start with the emails? I think it probably did.
It's a 32-count indictment. It includes 16 counts related to filing false individual income tax returns, failure to file reports of bank and financial accounts, 5 counts of bank fraud conspiracy, 4 counts of bank fraud. And I asked you that about exceeding his authority, Mueller, because it seems that that's what Manafort is suggesting through his spokesperson in that statement, saying he's innocent of all of these allegations. But bottom line, there's still no evidence of collusion, and the charges have nothing to do with Russia.
Well, look, in that regard, I happen to agree with Paul. There is no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, or cooperation or coordination. That never took place. We now know based on information which is publicly available, the only campaign that potentially colluded with Russia was the Clinton campaign. They took $5 million. They gave it to Christopher Steele. He went to Russia, tried to dig up this dirty dossier, and then they used that in a Pfizer application. That's all public information. Never has anybody of the Trump campaign, and Rod Rosenstein said this, never has anybody of the Trump campaign been tied to colluding with Russia in any way, shape, or form. And what we know is there was no material impact on the outcome of the election by the Russians, is what we've seen very clearly.
And I know this has been a big conversation at CPAC. The chairman said, you know, we're talking about Russia here, and to start off the conference saying we're talking about it because this Mueller investigation's been going on over a year, and there's still no evidence of collusion. And he said, we want to know what they've got, and we want to know what it is now. CPAC is underway. Your final thoughts before we go?
Look, I think the president today is going to deliver a very important address to CPAC. The issue of gun safety and mental health stability has to be paramount right now. We have to do, like the president said, everything we can do humanly possible to protect our children as they go to school every day. That has to be the priority of our country moving forward.
All right. Corey Lewandowski, thanks for being here this morning. We do await the president now.
Thank you.
Minutes away, we'll take you live to CPAC. The president arriving there a second ago. You'll see it live when that speech begins. Also, the president believes some American teachers should be armed in the classroom. That debate is hot, and that debate is next.
If you hardened the sights, you're not going to have this problem, because these guys who lack courage will never go into those schools. Those schools are going to be safe.